over in North Carolina, their state Supreme Court has just issued a ruling forcing the state to count tens of thousands of votes that are missing crucial details required by law, such as having no driver's license number and no last four digits of their social security numbers on file. And this decision of theirs is crucial given the fact that the election in question is currently split by only 700 votes, meaning that this one decision can actually change the outcome of the race. And also, it creates a fascinating loophole where you have state election laws be very clear about what can and cannot be done, but if the state elections board decides to not follow the laws, well, it doesn't matter. Those votes will still be counted, and seemingly no one will be held accountable. Let's go through the details together. And as always, if you appreciate content like this that's oftentimes completely overlooked by the legacy news outlets, I do hope you smash that like button so that this video can reach ever more people via the YouTube algorithm. And also consider smashing that subscribe button so you can get our new episodes delivered directly into your newsfeed every time we publish them. We're almost at 2 million subscribers, and so let's make it happen together. Now, getting back to the story, let's rewind the clock back to August of 2023. That was when a man by the name of Michael Morgan, he stepped down from his position as a justice on the North Carolina State Supreme Court, leaving a vacancy. And as per the state constitution, that vacancy was filled with an appointment by the governor. And as such, the next month, in September of 2023, the Democrat North Carolina governor appointed a Democrat by the name of Allison Riggs to fill the vacancy. And the reason I mentioned that she is a Democrat is because North Carolina is a bit unique in that they have actual partisan elections for the state Supreme Court. And so, for example, in states like Wisconsin, as just one example, they have elections for the state Supreme Court, but those candidates are not identified by party affiliation. They're all politically unaffiliated. But in North Carolina, justices on the state Supreme Court, they serve for 8-year-long terms, and when they run for office, they overtly identify with one or the other political party. And so you fast forward to November of 2024, and the actual election for that spot on the Supreme Court was held. Because Allison Riggs was not elected, she was appointed, she had to go through the election process as the Democrat incumbent candidate. Opposing her was a man by the name of Jefferson Griffin. He was the Republican candidate who, prior to running for the state Supreme Court, he served as a judge on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. And so, between these two, the election was held in November of last year. You had 5.5 million total ballots cast, and when the dust settled, the Democrat incumbent won. Ms. Allison Riggs won the election by 734 votes. Now, because that margin of victory was so slim, razor slim, literally 0.01%, multiple recounts were had. However, all three recounts found the same thing, that the Democrat candidate had won. However, Mr. Griffin did not take the supposed loss lying down. And instead of conceding the race, he filed a lawsuit in North Carolina State Court, arguing that roughly 60,000 votes should actually be disqualified, given the fact that the voters who cast those ballots had voter registrations on file that did not include their driver's license number and or the last four digits of their social security number. This lawsuit of his, it stopped the state elections board from being able to officially certify Ms. Riggs as the winner of the election, pending resolution to the case. Now, eventually, the case made its way up to the North Carolina Appeals Court, wherein Mr. Griffin won. And for your reference, Mr. Griffin is a judge on the appeals court, but he did recuse himself from the case. Regardless, though, in a 2-to-1 split decision, the appeals court ruled that there were likely tens of thousands of ballots that were wrongly allowed to be included in the final count because those ballots came from people who did not comply with state law and or the state constitution. Just for your general reference, it has been a requirement since the year 2004 that voters must have their registration paperwork include either their driver's license number and or the last four digits of their social security number in order to be considered valid to vote. However, it appears that the State Elections Board has been failing to enforce this requirement for many years now. And also, it's worth noting that besides just this, there was another category of military and overseas voters who did not provide a copy of their photo ID with their ballots, which is also a requirement by state law. Basically, what happened is that state law said one thing, but the State Election Board appeared to have been very loose with enforcing those laws, to the point that you had, on the one hand, upwards of 60,000 people without the required information in their registration still vote, and also you had overseas voters who did not attach the necessary photo ID to their ballots still vote. Now, as a part of their actual ruling, the appeals court, they, quote, gave voters whose ballots have been challenged 15 business days to provide the necessary verifying information, such as driver's license or social security numbers, to prove their voter eligibility. Meaning that whether it was the overseas military voters or just the people whose registration paperwork was missing those numbers, they all had 15 business days to fix the problem. Also, it is worth mentioning that besides the 60,000 incomplete registrations and the overseas military personnel without IDs, there was actually another class of people whose votes were overturned by this case. Quote, "A third category affects possibly hundreds of overseas voters who have never lived in the United States. According to the appeals court, their ballots cannot be counted due to violations of state residency law." Now, if all this is getting too confusing to follow, let me summarize it simply by saying the following. The appeals court found 3 buckets of people. The first bucket was roughly 60,000 voters whose registration paperwork was incomplete. They had 15 days to fix it up in order to have their vote count. Then the second bucket was overseas and military voters without a photo ID. They were also given 15 days to fix their votes. And then lastly, you had a group of voters who apparently never lived in the United States. And the court completely invalidated their votes without any option for any kind of a remedy. It is unclear how such people were even able to vote in the first place. Regardless, though, that's what the court said. However, the case was appealed again all the way up to the North Carolina State Supreme Court, and Miss Allison Riggs, who I should mention is a justice on that court, she recused herself from the case, just like Mr. Griffin recused himself from the case in the appeals court. But even without her, the State Supreme Court ruled in her favor. Specifically, in a 4-2 split decision, the State Supreme Court ruled that the ballots in question must be counted. And the rationale is that the mistake is on the part of the election board, not the voters. And therefore, the voters cannot be punished. Here's specifically what the majority on the State Supreme Court wrote. Quote, "The North Carolina State Board of Elections' inattention and failure to dutifully conform its conduct to the law's requirements is deeply troubling. Nevertheless, our precedent on this issue is clear. Because the responsibility for the technical defects in the voters' registrations rests with the board and not the voters, the wholesale voiding of ballots cast by individuals who subsequently proved their identity to the board by complying with the voter identification law would undermine the principle that this is a government of the people in which the will of the people, the majority, legally expressed, must govern." All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. Listen. It's obvious that the financial system is not looking too great. After being pumped up with trillions of virtually free government dollars for many, many years now, well, the stock bubble might actually burst in the near future. And in that process, unfortunately, it could take away the nest egg of anyone who happens to be exposed to it. And so consider taking this opportunity to diversify into something which is beyond the grasp of Washington, D.C. and Wall Street, physical gold and silver. And the best company to use, in my opinion, is the sponsor of today's episode, American Hartford Gold, who I should mention is also my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. And besides myself, they have thousands of 5-star reviews from other Americans, and they also have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. And working with them is rather simple. They have a huge selection of coins, bars, and rounds to choose from. They have super friendly staff who you can call, and they can set up either gold delivery directly to your doorstep, or they can even set you up in a gold IRA. And then lastly, best of all, if you tell them the Roman sent you, they will throw in a free gold coin with your first qualifying purchase. So give them a call. The number is 866-242-2352. That's 866-242-2352. Or you can simply text Roman to 65532. I'll also throw a link to their webpage. It'll be down there in the description box below. What this means in practice is that the 60,000 votes that were cast by people with incomplete registrations, they're going to be left intact. Those people will not have to provide any additional documentation. However, interestingly, the State Supreme Court, it did uphold the other 2 portions of the lower court's ruling, meaning that the overseas and the military voters, they'll still have to provide their photo IDs in order to have their votes count, except now they'll have 30 days to do so. And also the group of voters who never lived in the US, they will have their votes removed from the tally entirely without any option to cure them. And so that is where this election currently stands. The election itself was held roughly 5 months ago, back in November, but even to this very day, an official winner has not been announced. The Supreme Court ruling was issued on Friday, April 11th, and it gives the overseas military voters 30 days to send in their paperwork. This means that by May 10th, a final recount can be had and a true winner can be announced. When that happens, I will let you know. However, in the meantime, if you would like to, for one, read the state Supreme Court full majority opinion, I'll throw a link to it down in the description box below. And also, I'd love to know your thoughts on this particular matter. What is your opinion of the state of North Carolina passing these voter ID requirements back in 2004, the state elections board not following those requirements, and then when someone actually calls them out for it, the Supreme Court says that nothing can really be done. It's not the voters' fault that the state elections board did not follow the law. The voters should not be disenfranchised for it, and therefore their votes will still count, even though they don't meet the standard of the letter of the law. They technically shouldn't count, but they do. Do you agree with that decision? And also, do you think someone will be held accountable from the state elections board for making the decision to not enforce the law? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because one way to look at it is that this does create a bit of a loophole where the state legislature can create any laws that they want, any requirements that they want, but then if the state elections board just decides to be sloppy with the implementation or to just not implement those requirements at all, nothing will be done. At least seemingly. I mean, you never know. Maybe a different case will be handled differently, but at least in this case, the letter of the law said one thing, the state elections board did not follow the letter of the law, and yet the votes cast in that manner will still be counted. Very interesting. I'd love to know your thoughts. Please leave them in the comment section below. I'd love to know what you think of the case. I'll be reading your thoughts later tonight as well as into the week. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.